There's a very strong principle that I like to use, which is also from the Tao Te Ching. It's called the empty vessel. And the empty vessel means that a cup is useful because of its emptiness. If I give you a cup with cement within it, it's not going to be useful. So you need an empty cup for it to be useful. And similarly, I think that great leaders and businesses serve best when they create space for others to contribute, to grow and innovate. And this means shifting leadership from authority to facilitation.
I'm Mark Cook, president of Windfall Partners. We get leaders unstuck and thriving with their teams. After turnarounds as chief executive, the largest ever studies of award-winning leaders, a New York Times bestseller, and 5-star keynotes, I've coached 4,000 client wins at top brands. My Bold Encounters is an advanced system for leading. First, powerful steps on a path forward. Second, problem-solving skills that beat obstacles fast. Now, lead with Bold Encounters today.
Welcome to Bold Encounters. I'm Mark Cook, and with me today, I have Tom Zaiderman, who leads Ruby.ai. Pretty important topic these days, AI, and he's at the front, cutting edge of AI. But he's also in the front of leadership. He has a very unique, exceptional outlook on leadership. How are you doing, Tom?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Mark.
Yeah, pleasure. Such a pleasure to meet you and have a conversation. I got so interested. We were talking about something completely different, and I said, this CEO needs to be on my show. And so here we are. I'm really grateful. I wanted to start out just in asking you the big question, and then we'll dive into some details and some other topics. But everyone should have this foundational philosophy of leadership. If they go into leading humans and work and just wing it, it often goes mediocre or poor. They have to have a philosophy of how they do that, even above and even below the mechanics. So if I ask you, what is your philosophy of leadership and leading people in work, what would you say?
To me, leadership, and this is something that I've been building throughout my career, is I always come back to the one truth that in the end of the day, leadership is service. And it's the question of how you serve others, how you get the most out of others, how you facilitate success, and how you're coming from a place of giving, and not from a place of achieving and going up, but from a place of giving to your stakeholders, to your employees, to your colleagues, in a way that you just serve. You just serve. You provide your skills and your gifts to the people around you so they can be the best version of themselves. And that will yield the results personally, professionally, and of course for the organization that everybody is working for.
Yeah, it's beautiful. That's beautiful. I'm going to take a risk. I've done a lot of research on leadership and results, and I have some data behind my opinions, but I want to hear your experiential opinion about how money fits into this. Like, okay, great. That's a nice platitude. Go serve people and do it in the specific ways you said. But business is about making money, I thought. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So the way I think about service, or the mindset of service, this is not just about serving customers, right? It's rethinking leadership, rethinking strategy, rethinking company culture through the lens of service. And to ground this conversation a little bit, I like to draw from the Tao Te Ching. If the listeners are not familiar with it, it's an ancient Chinese philosophy that provides deep wisdom on how to lead, act, and build in harmony with the world. So there are three main, very important concepts that are following under the umbrella of service that I like to draw inspiration from. And I'll give some concrete examples about how it serves, in the end of the day, the bottom line of the company. The first one is effortless action, and it's called in Chinese Wu Wei. And Wu Wei, or an effortless action, teaches us that the most effective leadership and business strategies don't come from excessive force, but from aligning with natural flows. And in the case of business, it's the natural flows of the market, the environment you're operating in. We often set very rigid visions and push hard to force outcomes. But true service, from a business perspective, means responding to what is needed in the moment. Trying to control customers through aggressive sales tactics or rigid strategies, it often leads to resistance and short-term gains at the expense of long-term loyalty of your customer base. And I can give an example from Apple, for example. Think about how Apple adapts its product development. There's strategy about product development and how they think about it. Instead of forcing features onto customers, they observe user behavior. They seamlessly integrate technology into everyday life. Their design philosophy prioritizes usability and natural interactions, and that leads to customer loyalty, strong brand equity, and without the need for aggressive sales tactics. They just swimming with the current of the flow in the market as the consumer behavior changes and the needs are changes. And the counterexample for that is, if you remember, BlackBerry was once a market leader, and they really clung too rigidly to its original physical keyboard, if you remember, and they kept delivering the keyboard design instead of adapting to the touchscreen revolution back in the day. So by resisting the natural evolution of user preferences and the flow of the market and the natural order of the market, they lost its relevance and market share.
Yeah. I have to say this because I'm talking to an AI expert, and I've used it for this really esoteric entertainment thing where I watched that BlackBerry movie, and oh boy, that's crazy. And the whole plot is what you just said: the ignorance of others and the selfish gains possible. And so it's interesting. The last few movies that have been super controversial and pushing an agenda of one sort or another instead of just a plot, I look up and do the research on how much of it is true. And even though there's this big sentence at the first of the movie that says, based on a true story, if you go have ChatGPT or some other tool that you use, deeply research, verify the research, make sure it's recent, and say, what are the main elements of the plot and how many of them are true, you usually get 0 for 10. They just make stuff up and it barely resembles reality. And so I hope the BlackBerry story was just ignoring customers and being very passionate about thumb keyboards and not the story. I just gave it an advertisement to go watch that movie, but wow, that's a crazy movie, a crazy story if it happens to be half true. Anyway, I love that example because it's a perfect example of take and not serve, money before others. It's going right. It's a great example of what you're saying. So what else is underneath that word serve? Because serve's a big word. We hear it all the time. It's in everything. Dig a little bit in your actual day-to-day of leading the teams and the human beings that interact with the prospective customers, then serve the customers and get the referrals. Like, how do you orchestrate that, and how does service in specific, active, actionable ways look in your leadership?
Yeah, of course. So my day-to-day is mostly about innovation and R&D because of the space that I'm in, AI and embodied AI and autonomous systems and robotics. And there's a very strong principle that I like to use, which is also from the Tao Te Ching. It's called the empty vessel. And the empty vessel means that a cup is useful because of its emptiness. If I give you a cup with cement within it, it's not going to be useful. So you need an empty cup for it to be useful. And similarly, I think that great leaders and businesses serve best when they create space for others to contribute, to grow and innovate. And this means shifting leadership from authority to facilitation, trying to control customers by dictating what they should want or how they should use a product, stifles engagement and reduces trust. It's the same with employees, right? You can't cheat the system. You can't treat your customers in one way and treat your employees in a different way. So from an employee and leading team perspective, how you facilitate the team, how you get the best out of the team in a way that it gives them space in a not prescriptive, but in a facilitative way to innovate and to solve very, very hard problems in order to push the boundaries of the product in a way that will just increase the level of serving customers, serving communities, serving the ecosystem. So that's a very, very important principle for me on a day-to-day basis, which is facilitation as opposed to authority, giving space instead of pushing agenda or prescribing. And maybe an example that a lot of people can relate to is Airbnb. And Airbnb really transformed the hospitality industry, because instead of controlling the entire experience like traditional hotels, they created a platform that enabled others, in that case hosts, to provide unique travel experiences. And their success came from stepping back and facilitating rather than dictating how the experience is going to be. And by creating that space for people to participate, they turned a simple idea into a global movement.
Wow. That's an exactly perfect example. So I was headed towards seeing myself in a workplace with an employee and not coming with my cup full of things I'm going to tell you to do, but rather coming with an open mind and saying, what will you put in this cup? And I am here to be of value and facilitate what you put in this cup. But the Airbnb thing is literally, I'm not going to name brands, but I can be an exceptional hotel and it's going to look, and we both go to a lot of hotels around the world. So we're on business and we see the same similar things all the time because they're the best they can do and think of as a team. And yet Airbnb said, no, we're going to facilitate you creating a space as you understand people and people that stay with you. And people, because I've always thought it's just facilitating people's houses as they are, and I've stayed in a few, and there is a lot of how they are already. It's not like they've crafted something perfect. But there are also Airbnb, a number of them, that have crafted an interesting, new, and molded the house and the remodel in a whole different way than Marriott or Hilton would even ponder. So, and that's times the nth degree. Like there's just so many people doing that. Love that. I'm bringing the cup. I'm not bringing the exact kind of bed and pillow you used to.
Correct.
I love it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Leaders needs to hold the space for their team. Yeah. They just need to hold the space as opposed to hold the space and also push the agenda, push the content into the space. They just need to hold the space, give that comfort, psychological safety, and just hold the space for innovation and for people to be the best version of themselves.
Yeah, love it. Okay, yeah. One other thing about service before we'll dive into some more detail later, but tell me one more before we switch topics, because I love this.
Yeah. So another concept from the DAO is interconnectedness. And that means in business, serving all stakeholders. So a core lesson from the DAO is that everything is interconnected. And true service in business means recognizing that employees, customers, suppliers, and even the broader community must all be treated with the same care and respect. And businesses that focus only on customer satisfaction while neglecting their employees or supply chains, they ultimately undermine their long-term success. You cannot cheat the system. You cannot give certain type of energy to one component of the overall system and neglect another component of the system without having imbalance in your system. And imbalance means crisis, short-term value, bad customer reviews, loss, reduced margin, and all of it. And I really like this example actually for Costco, because Costco exemplifies this principle beautifully, because they prioritize fair wages and benefits for its employees, while many retailers cut costs by underpaying workers. And Costco invests in its staff, which leads to higher productivity, lower turnover, and ultimately stronger customer experiences. And this interconnectedness approach has resulted in sustained profitability and customer loyalty for Costco. You cannot not give enough. You cannot not give to your employees and expect your employees to give your customers. It just doesn't work. The flow of giving and serving is not going to work if you're not going to treat every component of your system and ecosystem as interconnected that affect each other. If you don't see the direct effect, it will end up affecting each other if it's not balanced from a serving and giving perspective.
It's interesting. This one, my comment is not just a confirmation of what you're saying. It's a beautiful principle, but it's an interesting esoteric thing that is because of what you just said. I've noticed that there are chances where employees say, I don't like management. I'm not tuned into them. I just need my paycheck, but I can love the customers. I'm going to be on their side and I'm going to advocate for them. But in that case, what's interesting, the danger is, and it has played out so many times, that when that employee gets disconnected from behind them, the leadership, then it hurts their career. So you would think, well, if you don't like your leadership, just focus on the customer and love that part of the system and it'll all work out. It's not true. You have to interconnect. You have to forward integrate, so to speak, as a human instead of a business. Another thought that's really that you remind me of is for a book that I co-authored with David Sturt, great work. It's a New York Times bestseller. And I interviewed a gentleman named Miguel, and he was in a fish. He was, before he got the job, he wasn't at a fish farm, this huge, hundreds and hundreds of acre fish farm. And they were struggling and they were jamming all the different types of fish, the cod and the salmon, all the things into their typical baths or whatever they call them. And they just were not pulling things up. Prices were falling in their market. They were not operating. So they searched for the best biologist they could find. And Miguel steps in, and the short version of the story is that he says, we are not feeding fish grain from the dry earth and chicken bones. We're going to feed them a natural diet. So we're going to not chase off the flamingos and the birds. We're going to invite them. And we will lose 20% of our fish, but our prices will go up. We'll have more fish in natural ponds and natural lakes. We're going to change the river flow. And it worked. They ended up selling to some of the greatest restaurants in New York. More fish lived in total. More fish were sold in total. The whole thing, the whole ecosystem, because it was interconnected, produced profitability and price and loyalty, and everyone won, every side of it.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a great example. All right, I want to ask you, I want to switch horses a little bit. I want to change topics, and I want to ask you about what the young Tom Zaiderman is working as a kid or a young adult, whenever it was, and life's about to get serious. Tell me about that time, that young guy, and how your work life really started to get serious and stuff.
Yeah. So in my early 20s, just at the end of my military service, beginning of the transition to my civil career, I lost my mother to cancer. And shortly after, I also lost one of my best friends in combat. And it was...
Let me interrupt you and ask you how old you were. How old are you in that point?
It was 21 with my friend and a couple of years later with my mom.
So your welcome to adulthood is losing the two most important people at that moment in your life. Is that fair to say?
Very close friend, and my mom and I was very close as well. Yes.
Okay, tell me about it. Sorry to interrupt.
No, so that was a very, you can imagine, very the turmoil was big. Handling the family, handling siblings. If it's my mom, and then with my friend, it's the circle of friends, and everything that impacted is the loss of my friend. And it really impacted my focus on my life, on my career. It was very, very consuming, very emotional. And I think I truly believe that in every dark period in life, there's like a glimpse of a spark of light that helps you to facilitate growth or help you get over or graduate from a hard period with a lot of lessons. So for me, this period really taught me compassion, and really opened my heart. If it's talking about my friend and how, I know it's a cliche, but usually, the best people usually go first. And he was truly humble with high level of humility. I'm still thinking about him today, even if it's been almost 20 years, and I'm still learning from him on how he used to behave to people, how he used to interact with people, his level of tolerance and compassion. So through the stories and through reflecting about him and contemplating about him, it helped me learn a lot about compassion and open my heart. And the same with my mother. In the couple of years before she passed away, I had to support, through chemotherapy and at home. And that really helped me to open my heart and be more compassionate and grow this muscle of giving. And I think it serves me well throughout my career, balancing leadership and confidence with this emotional openness, vulnerability, and ability to put my feet into other people's shoes and be compassionate. Before that, I think if I was to compare myself before that change and after that change, so before the change, I think I undervalue experiences, and I overvalue how fast my brain works. And I also undervalue connections, and I overvalue being right all the time, which means that before the change, I undervalued the principle of leadership, because leadership is not about making the right decision. It's about how well you connect to others and get them to follow you. Not because you're the smartest, but because who you are as a person. So that was a very good lesson for me, opening my heart and being more compassionate, and how it translates into my career.
Yeah, let me ask you, if I may ask you a little bit about that, and if you're uncomfortable, just tell me. But there was a project I worked on where I had to go over to a university and get a psychology advanced textbook, and there were 3 Dans from Harvard, and I can't remember their last names, so they're all on TED Talks and such, so you can find it easy. But there was this. They talked about a study when they were first trying to grapple, and their colleagues, not them, but they were trying to grapple with how to describe an experience, especially the emotions that are attaching to each of the pieces of data that are going into our mind, and how to organize that. Think about it, because they're feelings, it's not really easy to pin those down. But they were able to organize them basically on 3 axes, 2 very strong, much more significant than the third. And one, I'll use different terms because I like the lay terms better than the science terms. But one was excitement, one was thrill, and you have really positive, thrilling things, and then you have death at the bottom, and then in the middle of that, on the left and the right, going horizontally, you have meaning, essentially, which is goodness. The real word they use is technically goodness in a qualitative and quantitative, both types of ways. And so meaning, like it's really meaningful and important. And valence is what it is. And so on the right side, something's incredibly meaningful. And on the very left side, something is evil, literally. Valence is good and bad. So something very destructive and bad. And our emotions fit somewhere in that. And the reason I'm bringing all this up is for a couple of reasons. Um, you- Anytime I talked about that in my life, I've always thought of my mom. Like when I was young, I heard the Killers on the radio, and I fell in love with the Killers, a rock group. And I invited my son on his birthday and my wife for the first time, and they're amazing, and they still are amazing, I think. And I love going to them because they're such great entertainers. And so anticipating that concert and going for the first time was so exciting. But my mom sitting on her couch when she was alive, talking about life and its challenges and its successes, was no excitement at all, but so meaningful. And those two, different types of experience illustrate the things we experience. But I just think about your mom, and I've lost my father when I was young, but I lost my mom when I was older, and it was even harder, but it wasn't as consequential as you losing your mom at 21, heading into a career. And then also having to absorb your best friend. I had a really interesting situation with my best friend too. My best friend, he passed away in an avalanche. He was snowboarding before they let you on the lift, and he lost the fight with the avalanche. And so I got to see him in his casket, sadly, and I got to see him buried. And decades went by, and just about 5 or 10 years ago, his father passed away. And I was so close to their family. I certainly went to that. And I went to the gravesite. I was very interested in this. What I didn't know is that our state had changed the laws or the rules around those types of situations. And you were suddenly allowed to put two people in the same gravesite on top of each other in their caskets. And so I was going to celebrate his dad, thinking it was going to be a typical funeral and, be very respectful. And suddenly I'm looking at my best friend's gravesite dug up, and he's going on top. There's my friend's gravesite. It was so jarring, and that recollection was so haunting that I can't imagine feeling all that at the same time and starting a work life. I mean, how in the world did you refocus and say, I want to serve, and second of all, make money and be successful? How did you do that?
I kept, I used the mantra of what my friend and my mom would want for me, and how they're going away wouldn't need to, to hold me back for my purpose, for my mission. So just the mantra of prayers, of maybe meditation back in the day. I hadn't been meditating for many years. I came back to it only in the past year, but during this period, I had a lot of like community support and a little bit of spiritual support as well, and I kept going back to the mantra of what would be, they would want the best for me, and the best for me is to keep pushing, keep going until time it'll do its part, essentially, which is mellowing, making the pain a little bit less sharp.
Do you think that mantra and reminding and reminding and reminding and just forcing yourself to think that thought out ahead of yourself to keep pushing forward, do you think that putting those others first before money making started or facilitated this philosophy of leading that you now just espoused in the beginning of our conversation? Were the two related?
I think it was certainly the first stepping stone to get to those realizations about leadership. As I mentioned, it opened my heart and created more compassion on how I look at life and how I prioritize life and what's important in life. And so it just gave me perspective and helped me understand what's, essentially going to work, having a routine is a blessing compared to losing a loved ones, right?
Yeah.
Right? It's daunting sometimes. You feel the grind, but in the end of the day, if you take a step back, it's a blessing. So having that perspective really helped me kind of build my character through this compassion and opening my heart towards being, a more open-hearted leader that's like more open and more compassionate to stakeholders, with a better ability to read like emotional situation and regulate emotions and etc.
No question. Like you had a big punch in your stomach and the pain you felt helps you feel that for other people, no matter what. I think it's interesting too that there's a couple other connections that are interesting. First of all, loss created space for you to be autonomous. And I think it's fascinating that your whole life's work is about autonomous. And it all seems to be connected and powerful. It's really, really touching.
Yeah,
Really touching.
thank you for saying that. I haven't considered it before, that angle. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, I felt it. It's hard to be alone, but it gives you the space. And it's really hard to have that space, but it forces you to be somewhat autonomous and figure things out. Of course, there's in the human world, there's no such thing really. I mean, it means you've got to be responsible, but there's nothing that ever happens that's great without other people. And so it's a matter of being an autonomous contributor to a cooperation or a collaboration and a team. And even if they're not your formal team, to people that are going to help make something bigger than just you can make alone. So I love that. I love that. I'm so sorry you went through that, but I'm so glad that you got the positives out of it. And obviously you did. So I want to ask you, so you're a pretty successful leader. Tell us about your people right at the moment. I know you're in a startup situation more than you are in a big giant, multinational, but tell me about the people, not specifically, but tell me about them and how you view them and how you orchestrate the mechanics of the different functions in your company and lead them in a mechanical way through management in positive ways.
Yeah. So, when you running from or motivated from the mindset of service, you always want to be able to create space and facilitate for the different teams based on the different needs, and also to create space between teams for the teams to come together. So if it's facilitating processes and rituals within the company that help people and different teams come together and communicate their needs and what they need in a respectful and open way. If it's creating goals, and I really like the form of OKRs. I know it's a little bit traditional, but I really like cascaded OKRs where every objective is being served by key results from different teams, so that from the same objective, the key results from different teams can contribute to the same objective, and then those teams also are stakeholders and dependent on the progress of each other. So through that transparency of the goals and what we want to achieve, through the lens of service, I create those rituals of like the touch points between the teams, prioritizing their needs, understanding their needs, helping other teams to understand their needs and not necessarily put one team in front of the other one, because everybody, again, it's interconnectedness. It's an ecosystem. There's no one better than the other or more important than the other in the process of delivering value to customers. So this is how I treat them, in a very impartial but compassionate, open way between the teams and between the employees, and give them what they need when they need it.
That's great. In my work, it's about leading people mostly, but there has to be, when you get with the timing of quarters and weeks instead of years, there has to be management there. There has to be organization of some sort, or people can't cooperate with, there's got to be rules of the game. And it's interesting that our data literally forced us to do something very similar to what you just described in a little more simple and with some more depth, and not than you, but maybe than that model provides. And one of the things that is so radical that I've never even considered is how they view missions. And they don't view it as like 85% of people think about missions. And I won't turn this into my interview, but I'll just say this: if you go out a year or two and you find the big advance for customer base that you, as part of your teams, are trying to achieve, you can galvanize teams between each other, like you're describing, so powerfully if you really pay attention to that and prioritize those big achievements for others that you've been talking about and put the space in between. Beautiful. It's beautiful. So let's talk a little bit about what the essence of your strengths are. I mean, you have a breadth as I go through your resume, and you're doing autonomous. I'm going to let you talk about how you talk about it, because I just want to say AI because everyone's saying AI. But when you say autonomous, I went to visit Indiana Automotive. Let's see, what is Automotive Indiana? So it's the people that make Subarus and some of the Toyotas back in, whereas it's in Indianapolis, outside of Indianapolis. And I think it's called Lafayette, Indiana, actually. And I went in that, I think now it's 4 million square foot factory. And I have to watch out because the robots are running around that place doing very autonomous things. And it was crazy that they're actually watching out for me and not bumping into me. It's not like I had to follow all the lean tape because I was going to get killed. They were paying attention to the humans too. That's how I see the autonomous work, probably something like that. But I also see it in the ideas and the things of ChatGPT and some of, as they keep advancing, and Microsoft's version and such. Tell me what your strengths are in AI, and tell me what your philosophies and thoughts are about AI.
Yeah, so I would say as you said, there are many domains and spaces within AI. My specialty has always been AI that interacts with the physical world through hardware, through drones, through robotics, through autonomous vehicles. It's basically a bunch of sensors that can see, hear, measure, and all of that goes into neural network like the human brain. The model of the neural network makes sense out of it, of all the inputs, and creates a certain perception and understanding of the physical world, and then they can make decisions based on what they see and understand from the physical world. And that's kind of like the next forefront of AI, and it's called physical foundation model. So we've all seen AI mastering, image recognition. I show an AI a certain image, it will know to say that it's a dog or a cat, right? But what about AI that truly understands the physical world? That's where the physical foundation model comes in. And unlike traditional AI that trained primarily on visual data, those physical foundation models learn from rich tapestry of real-world sensor inputs, images, sure, but also tactile feedback, audio cues, and even the robot's own movements can learn from the environment. And this, if I may, embodied intelligence is a game changer for robotics, and this is very similar to what you saw in the factory that you went to visit. Because imagine robots that cannot just see a chair or see a table, but also can feel the texture, hear the creak of its legs, and understand how to navigate around it in a cluttered room. So those physical foundation models are really enabling this level of nuance interaction and really paving the way for breakthroughs that we can't even begin imagining in manufacturing, logistics, healthcare, and much beyond that. And companies like Physical Intelligence and Skilled AI and NVIDIA they're leading the charge at developing a lot of those physical models, and they're just completely transforming how robots learn and adapt. And this isn't just about making robots smarter. It's about giving them the kind of intuitive understanding like humans, so they can understand the world that allows them to truly collaborate with humans in a human environment and tackle complex and real-world challenges. I'm really excited about that space and what it has in store for us in the next couple of years.
Makes me, I was at a meeting at a university last night, and there were clubs meeting. And there was an enormous class. Actually, it was a club that was doing line dancing. And so I thought of the humorous example. You're describing all that. I'm thinking, I wonder if those that are left out on the side that I saw are going to be dancing with robots next. And the smell, like, are people? They're certainly working on smell too for cooking and such. Are people working on autonomous and computer perspectives on smell? Probably.
Yes, the unique molecules or structure of molecules that transmit certain signals about smell. So certainly.
Fascinating. So we are at a point where I want to ask you, instead of my set of questions that I had prepared, what else would you like to tell the world? Like, let me give you a chance to say whatever you want to whoever you want, because I think you're involved in so many different things and have so many different perspectives and your international exposure and experience. Just whatever you want. What would you want to tell people that are trying to lead? On one hand, a PTA meeting and group, and on the other hand, a bigger company and everything in between. What would you like to tell them?
I would like to tell them that if they believe in what we just talked about, that leadership, a core principle with leadership is serving others, and basically waking up in the morning and asking yourself, how may I serve today the people who need me, the organization that need me, etc. Use every small opportunity during the day to respond or interact with situations, circumstances as people from the place of giving. And I would like to share like a framework that's really working for me well. And even the smallest opportunity, even with your child, you can build that muscle of coming and responding from a place of giving. And usually the training for those things, it's when you encounter a situation or a comment or a circumstance that triggers you the most, right? Because we see something that we don't like, it presses on one of our buttons, we tend to be reactive, right? So how do we burn off the reactivity and try to come from a place of giving? That's really build the muscle of giving. So the framework is, you see something, you perceive something, somebody tells you something that you don't like, circumstance, you come home at night tired, you see a situation that you don't necessarily prefer, you go to work, see your team in a situation you don't necessarily prefer. First, pause and take a deep breath and tell to yourself, what a pleasure. I can now burn off some more of my reactivity and be a better person with that opportunity. And then you start to asking yourself, why am I getting this lesson? Oh, because I feel it creates those emotions within me. I can starting hear this little voice saying, oh, you should tell these people not to do this, and you should control that person to do Y. And you start observing those voices in your head that pushing you to be reactive, but you don't identify with those voices. Those are just like clouds that goes through the emotion that you feel through the triggering. And then you take a deep breath. If you can't respond right away, take 5 or 10 minutes, or even tell the person, can I come back to you in 5 to 10 minutes? I'm going to do a restroom break. I'm going to drink something first. Do whatever you need to do so that you are calibrated again and you can respond from a place of giving, which means, how do I respond to the situation in a way that is not reactive and in a way that it's a win-win situation for everybody? So I'm going to repeat, pause, take a deep breath, Tell to yourself, what a pleasure. Listen to those voices in your head and understand, why am I getting those voices? Don't identify with them, and then respond from a giving place.
I love that. I'm hearing like you feel yourself get a little emotional in a negative way, and so you imagine an out of body experience of watching yourself and listening to your own thoughts and objectively handling them in the ways you just described, and giving yourself that space again and to handle it in the most humanly positive way possible. One of the things, this is the hardest thing in the world you're talking about. We get upset with each other and react, and sometimes it's yelling, and sometimes it's a missile or something. It's just terrible. And so
that's the true work. That's the really true work.
It's the work of life, isn't it? With each other, because we die alone. Like, we're not meant to be alone. None of us would survive if we're all alone. It's just how we're built. It's been proven in so many different ways, and people talk about it all the time. It's just a true thing. And, we're not here to be alone. We are here to collaborate, cooperate, be friends, and love. And if we can't do what you're saying, it's a high bar. But one of the things I had an experience where I wasn't as perfect as I should have been towards a person I really love most. And I thought after about the pause, I said that word in my head too. And I thought, and this is great advice. It's not advice I've learned to take all the time yet, but it extends what you're saying a little bit, but I'd love to hear your thoughts if it makes sense. There's about 4 hours between meals. And I thought, I'm going to feed the pause. If I get triggered on something, I'm going to not take 5 minutes to go to the bathroom. Sometimes when it's, obviously most of the time you do what you said, but if it's really upsetting, maybe it's a time when you need to feed the pause. You need to go 4 hours. You need to feed it and wait till the next meal to respond, and give it 4 hours to just calm down and be sane instead of crazy. Anyway.
Yes.
Okay.
You can take as long as you need.
Yeah. Take as long as you need. So before we go on and finish, I want to ask you, I'm going to throw a curveball at you. I want you to think of something really functional and practical in leading people and organizations and teams that you are particularly good at in that very practical workplace type of situation. And I know I'm asking you to set your modesty aside, and I am. Like, there's something that you have to contribute that maybe is stronger than your other strengths and different than other people, and you really think you have it to share besides service. What is the practical version of all this? And what are those 3 to 5 steps?
First thing that comes to mind is positivity. Working in the startup is challenging. There are days that you don't make an inch progress, and you need to motivate your team, and you need to keep positive, and you need to communicate the vision and remind them of the purpose and why they're here. So I would say positivity, and positivity in a way that it's more of a realistic positivity. You want to give them the full picture of what's going on. You don't want to ignore that side of the soup and give them only the tasty positive side. You want to acknowledge everything in a very human, understanding way, but you also want to show them the glimmer of light within, so that they can stay motivated and positive and keep pushing towards the vision and the goals. And if I were to cut it into steps, it would be, you sense that the space becomes a little bit discouraged or demotivated. You ask people to share how they feel about the situation. You create the psychological safety. Then you acknowledge what they feel. You talk about your perspective about it. You truly said, yeah, I was also disappointed that we haven't met that or that didn't deliver to that customer or whatever it is, and try to show them the full picture, right? How you reframe the failure as a learning experience, and how you show them that with that experience, we had to go through that experience in order to now deliver better, stronger, and a higher value product to customers and to stakeholders.
Of that. That's terrific. We measured a lot of things, and positivity and leadership was a high predictor of client outcome, success, and financial impact. And so we dug into it because of one of the things you just said is, no, I mean, be realistic, but positive. And, everyone hears the word positive and we automatically think, because of common usage and the cliche, that, oh yeah, he's blue sky and everything's got to be rosy. And you're saying, no, it's realistic. It's interesting. I've never thought of a simple thing until we dug into it. The word positive, you think about the definitions of it. Positive, we tend to think of as non-negative and upward thinking and facing and striving. But the word positive also means sure, right? So you have this evidence that you gather, like, oh, you're behind on your quota as a salesperson, for example. That's an easy example because that's happening everywhere. So, 2/3 of salespeople are behind on their quota. So, hey, you're behind on your quota. Let me remind you how last quarter you were also behind. And some of the things that I thought were heroic and amazing that you helped existing customers grow with and prospects see, and you actually rebounded and came and back and you did it. And that's truth, right? And so to have that evidence makes it positive. I'm positive you can make it this time because I saw you before. So it's like you say, a really well-grounded, realistic, positive. If positivity didn't happen a lot in this life, we'd all be jobless and dead, right? So good things are happening all the time because we can have a job once in a while and be alive and have something to eat, most of us. And so it's realistic to be positive. Like you said, I love that. It's a really important one for leaders to hear what you say there. Well, I am so grateful. I'm so grateful to know you. You are a gem as a leader, and I love your message. And all these points that you've made are exceptional points. And I just want to thank you for being on Bold Encounters. It was truly an important, meaningful encounter for me and discussion. So thanks, Tom. I'm glad to know you now. Thanks so much.
For me as well. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us to get leaders unstuck and thriving with their teams. You've heard a little bit about the power of bold encounters and leadership. Watch on. Go to full episodes with the iconic expert interviews at markspencercook.com/podcast. And please subscribe. My site takes you directly to YouTube video and podcast versions. Please make comments. Share this with your friends. Also, reach out to us to just brainstorm your priorities, challenges, events, or how Bold Encounters might help. Visit windfallpartners.com. Click the Let's Talk button without obligation and reach out. I look forward to speaking. Thank you for joining us. Now, let's lead with Bold Encounters today.